Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the programme tonight, it's an important day for the Indian Space Research Organisation. We are one step closer to landing a rover on the moon, with the Vikram Lander separating from the propulsion module that took the lander to the orbit of the moon. On the 23rd of August at 5:47 p.m, India should have the lander Vikram down on the surface of the moon. So in case you are confused, there is the entire mission, that's called Chandrayaan-3. There's the lander which will touch down on the surface of the moon, that's called Vikram, after Vikram Sarabhai, the father of the Indian space program. And then there is Pragyan, that's the rover which will emerge from a hold inside Vikram before it scars the lunar surface. Now we have excellent experts on this show, also the Minister Jitendra Singh. But at half past the hour, a very important interview. Afghanistan's Taliban government are celebrating their second anniversary of the takeover of their country. The collapse of the international security grid, the pullout of international forces, and the demolition of what was a promising democracy has been one of the saddest international events. Women have borne the brunt of this transition. What is happening in the country is nothing short of gender apartheid. Joining us, a very special guest, Maryam Atash, perhaps the most prominent Afghan voice in the diaspora. She's an attorney and member of the US Department of State's US Afghan Women's Council. She runs an NGO still, somehow or the other, in Afghanistan. We talk about where Afghanistan is today, 2 years after the Taliban came back. But first, the journey of Chandrayaan so far, including what's happened, what took place today, and what's awaited.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Chandrayaan-3 was launched on the 14th of July 2023 from Sriharikota using the launch vehicle Mark III.
Normal.
It reached the moon's orbit on the 5th of August and has since been orbiting the moon. On the 16th of August, the Chandrayaan was put in an orbit of about 153 kilometers by 163 kilometers, and all lunar-bound maneuvers were completed. Today, after the propulsion module and the Vikram lander separate, and that's a process that you can see here in this animation, the propulsion module will continue its journey in the same orbit, having done its job. The Vikram lander will be further deorbited into a 100 kilometer by 30 kilometer elliptical orbit. On the 23rd of August, after the preloaded commands are triggered, the Vikram lander will attempt a soft landing on the surface of the moon. After the lander touches down and the lunar dust settles, the Pragyan rover will be rolled down. Vikram will take images of the Pragyan rover and the rover will take images of the lander. The first Indian selfies from the lunar surface will arrive. The 14 Earth Day planned scientific exploration of the moon will begin. All right, so exciting times for ISRO, India. Remember, 23rd of August, 5:47, that's when Vikram lands on the surface of the moon. Pallav Bagla joins us. We've been tracking the Indian space program, him much more than me, for many, many years now. Annapurni Subramaniam, Director of the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and Dr. Raghunandan, Director of the Delhi Science Forum. Thank you all very much for being with us. Let's just first bring our viewers some animation of the event that took place today, which is why we are here to discuss Chandrayaan. So let's play out that video, which actually shows this. And what you see is the separation of the propulsion module with the Vikram lander. The Vikram lander is on the left. That is what will get down to the surface of the moon. And the propulsion module with its engines was part of the system which actually got Vikram into the correct orbit. There's going to be another deorbit maneuver. In other words, they're going to lower the altitude of Vikram, the lander, before making that big attempt in the next couple of days. On the 23rd, we know when it's going to happen. Pallav, what's the process or the procedure from here onwards?
Very straightforward. Today, the propulsion module and the Vikram lander are in elliptical orbit around the moon. tomorrow the Vikram Lander is brought closer to the moon in a more elliptical orbit, and that should be a fairly normal procedure for ISRO. They've done that so many times. But after that, they will assess the instruments on board the Vikram Lander, then send the commands up from Bangalore to Vikram Lander, and then program it for the D-Day, which is for the crucial day of soft landing near the south pole of the moon. So, and that would be an automated part. That particular bit is automated. Not very much can be done by anybody because it takes effort to send a signal and bring it back. It will happen automatically, and they have worked very hard to make sure, done enough simulations, enough testing between Chandrayaan-2 Vikram failure and Chandrayaan-3.
Yeah.
And the scientists and engineers at the Indian Space Research Organization are very confident that this time they will have a soft landing on the moon.
Annapurni Subramaniam, what has ISRO changed between the last mission and now to try and ensure that we have a greater chance of success?
Yeah, so the space comes, you need to test, understand, simulate, again test, understand, and simulate. So there is a parameter space within which we know the things will move, and they have added that, and they have gone to larger parameter space where you have more tests carried out, and all the adverse things can be included, and then more and more tests are done. So understanding everything, and also certain type of measurements you can do in situ and make corrections before they land. So these are implemented and tested. So hopefully everything will be within this parameter space. So we see the lander landing on the moon properly.
Mr. Raghunandan, how difficult is it to soft land a lander on the surface of the moon?
Well, it is difficult. If you hark back to the Apollo moon landings, they had to do manual maneuvers. Neil Armstrong had to do it. This happened again later. There were some touchy moments there which required manual steering to get out of trouble. So 100% automated landings are always a bit iffy. In fact, recently, President Putin was supposed to have gone over to the Roscosmos facility to inquire about the progress of Luna 25. And the director there told him that missions of this kind had a 70% chance of success. But I think as far as Chandrayaan-3 is concerned, those odds have been reduced considerably. As was just said by our colleague from the Institute of Astrophysics, a lot more tests have been conducted this time. Some major alterations have been made in the software and the guidance for the landing systems. Particularly, they had extremely tight margins the previous time. They have now been given more wider margins in the algorithms so that there is a greater chance of success, and the software is given more chance to maneuver the spacecraft as it lands. And lastly, I think that they've got a lot more information on the landing site due to the huge volume of photographs and views that they have received from the Chandrayaan-2 orbiter, which is still doing the rounds, which has taken a large number of photographs of the surface, which have all been programmed in to the software. So now the lander knows much better the terrain where it is landing, and particularly the larger boulders to avoid. So I think all the parameters are now in favor. They've also modified the lander's legs, given it greater shock absorbing capability. So I think with all this, the chances of success this time are pretty good.
Pallav, we're going to be seeing a lot of Pragyan, of Vikram, and will we see a lot of the descent being filmed as well?
Not sure. They would probably be filming it, but to be able to beam it back live may be a challenge.
But will they be attempting that?
certainly there are so many cameras both on Vikram and on Pragyan. And remember, there is a hazard avoidance camera on Vikram, which is going to be taking images. First, the Vikram will hover at 800 meters above the lunar surface. Then it goes down further at 150 meters above the lunar surface, hovers there, figures out, takes images, matches it with the memory which Raghunandan was talking about, and then attempts a landing. So plenty of images would be there. How much of that can be beamed back live, I do not know, and whether ISRO would really want to do that, because bandwidth is always an issue, and the mission is always of prime importance. But most important is, if everything else fails, this time scientists at ISRO tell me they have what is called a salvage mode. Once they go in for rough braking, they go in for camera coursing, fine braking, and if things go wrong, the Vikram lander can still land at some point on the moon without crashing. So there is a salvage mode which they have incorporated for the first time. There is a lot of confidence in ISRO that they would be able to succeed in having a soft landing. And this soft landing is important for India, it's important for Russia, because they also have
future space missions.
And also for future space missions for America and other countries, because South Pole is the go-to destination for everybody, and India has pioneered going towards the South Pole.
Annapurni Subramaniam, what is it that we want to look for on the South Pole of the moon?
There are many things, in fact, and it's like a gold rush, right? So you have to understand what are the ions present there and the minerals present there, and of course, water. So all these are important. And many of the experiments which are going on board this mission will give us more insights into these, like all the experiments which are there on the lander and on the rover. And this will tell us about, how the temperature varies. This is very minute things are to be understood as well. There are overarching parameters we need to know. But if you want to take exactly what you want to do, how to extract things, you need to have quantitative measurements. So things like how the temperature changes on the surface, beneath the surface, because the regolith which this fine particles and rocks, the conductivity we do not know. So the temperature probes are there. And we also know that some moonquakes are there. So how do they actually, how much is this, how will that affect the experiments, etc., need to be found out. And of course, the mineralogy. So the rover will have two experiments. One will have the laser, one which ablates and measures the volatile components, the volatile elements as well as components. The other one is the alpha particle spectrometer, which actually will use the alpha particle as well as X-rays to actually get to know what the elemental abundance is there. So these are extremely important information, and we'll have a lot of quantitative measures. So these spectra taken from these will be kind of beamed down, and the analysis will be carried out to understand the quantitative measures of what is out there. And these are very important for to start from engineering, feats, how do you actually perform things, and scientifically what do you gain out of it, understanding what is out there, how it formed, everything actually. So it's a really big thing.
Absolutely. Pallav, the Russians are, their lunar mission is underway. They would be landing their rover, or the lander rather, they don't have a rover, on the surface of the moon pretty much at the same time, right?
Roughly. See, it started off late. They had a direct flight to the moon, unlike India's, which was circuitous. When you have small resources, you want to do things smartly. So we used a smart way of going to the moon. But the Luna 25 lander is supposed to land between the 21st and 23rd of August. India's Chandrayaan-3 cannot land before the 23rd of August for the simple reason India has to use the lunar dawn. Both Pragyan and Vikram are solar powered. They need to have sunlight available as soon as it reaches the lunar surface. So India cannot rush or try and beat the Luna 25 lander. India will have to do it on 23rd. But that Russia and India are good friends. So there is no race like that. It is, and Russia has been India's guru in ways in space technology. So it is both now having a waltz around the moon, Chandrayaan-3 and the Luna 25 both in the moon orbit, dancing around the moon and both wanting to reach to the south pole of the moon. And when two different spacecrafts reach the south pole of the moon, the data which Dr. Annapurni's group will get would be immense to enhance the understanding of the south pole. Because Artemis mission of America is targeting to have a permanent habitation, and that would probably be near the south pole of the moon.
Yeah. Mr. Raghunandan, what is next for India after this? I know Gaganyaan, but where does Chandrayaan necessarily lead us?
Yeah, just two things before I get to where we go next. One is, I think we are frequently referring to the lunar south pole, whereas the landing site is more accurately described as the south polar region.
Okay.
Because we are landing at roughly 70 degrees south, and the south pole would be 90 degrees south. So we are not exactly at the south pole, but we are landing in the south polar region, as is the Luna 25, which is also looking for an early sunrise, and that may be the reason why they may land a day earlier, because I believe their landing site sees the sun earlier than the landing site of Chandrayaan-3. In any case, be that as it may, I think the challenges before India going forward are many. I think we would have had a good moon mission. We will have the Gaganyaan mission. There will be missions to Mars later. I think three major challenges I would like to point to. One is that we see Russia and China increasingly collaborating together and developing perhaps joint programs. They've agreed to set up an orbiting station around the moon, etc. There is the Chinese space station here. India, which has still now been trying to carve out an independent slot, may in some senses now become more reliant on collaborations internationally, perhaps with the US, with the International Space Station, etc. The second major challenge, I think, for ISRO is to develop a heavier launch vehicle.
No, and that is you know, I mean, something we look at.
That I think would be very important, because that's one of the reasons why we have had to take this slingshot maneuver
to get to the surface,
which is very good.
All right, gentlemen, I'm just wrapping, sort of interrupting now. No, Pallav, out of time, my friend.
We have an Aditya
mission coming up. We're going to take a short break at this stage, and we're going to be following this very, very closely indeed on the 23rd, several hours. But we do need to take a short break. But before that, a very special interview that I did with the Minister, Jitendra Singh, the Minister looking after science, independent charge. Here's what he said. Well, joining us now, the Senior Minister Jitendra Singh. It is, of course, a very important day today, sir, in terms of the journey of Chandrayaan. The propulsion module has been separated from the Vikram Lander. How is this a particularly significant event in terms of the overall mission?
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you for asking that. Of course, every Indian feels proud of this, but yes, you rightly put it. I think what is exclusive from my point of view is that while we look up to Chandrayaan mission with huge amount of excitement, enthusiasm, inquisitiveness, curiosity, but it is not only confined to India any longer. The entire world is looking up to Chandrayaan, also because there are certain exclusive features associated with this. And that has been so right from the beginning of the Chandrayaan series. For example, even though we started off our space journey much after the USA and the then USSR, maybe in 1960s, when they were already on the verge of landing on the surface of the moon, which of course America did in 1969. But it was Chandrayaan-1 which brought home the evidence through pictures of the presence of water on the surface of the moon. And that was an eye-opener for the entire world community, because that then, led them to start asking themselves the possibilities of a human habitat on the surface of the moon, the the compatibility or non-compatibility or the extent of compatibility of a human life being feasible over there now. These were the things which were just stirring our imagination generation after generation. It's a part of fiction, part of literature, part of poetry, a part of our nursery rhymes about, imaginary people living on moon. But here it was Chandrayaan which for the first time prompted us to find answers to these questions which were hitherto part of the fiction. And this time, this mission is going to carry the same agenda further.
And sir, in terms of that agenda, let me ask you a direct question, sir. Give me a direct answer. What are India's space ambitions beyond Gaganyaan, beyond Chandrayaan? What are we looking to do, sir?
So I think, that this evidently places India as a frontline nation, not only in our space capabilities, but also in the terms of our capacity of innovation and technology, which is going to be the basic benchmark and determinant for the future economy of any country. It's going to be hugely possible, and I think we owe it a lot to Prime Minister Modi for having broken many of the taboos of the past. It was he who actually threw open the gates of Sriharikota, and we had during the launching also about as many as 1,000 media persons at a place which was forbidden even from peeping inside the gate. And from the point of Gaganyaan, yes, of course, it will be placing India, reaffirming India's position in that. And if you see overall, if you mean to say what is it going to mean, that India is now being accepted increasingly with each passing day as a very important global player. B, India is looked up with seriousness, not unlike till few years ago. Everybody, rest of the world thought that, these issues like climate change and clean energy and space missions were something which were not very close to India's priorities, or maybe India didn't have the capacity or the capability or the aptitude to address these issues. Here, now we are taking the lead. If it is climate, it's Prime Minister Modi who talks about it in COP. If it is energy, Prime Minister Modi says net zero by 2070. If it is space, it is now, you would recall when Prime Minister Modi visited DC, Washington DC, it was America which put across the invitation that our astronauts should be joining them for the space laboratory missions. So I think now the rest of the world is looking up to India. And this is going to reaffirm India's position as a frontline, not only player, but maybe a frontline leader in the times to come.
Sir, do you foresee an Indian space station? And secondly, do you foresee manned or crewed Indian deep space missions?
Yes, of course. As you asked about Gaganyaan, we are already into it. It got delayed, unfortunately, because of COVID by 2 or 3 years. We had to cut short. We had to interrupt the training of the potential astronauts, which was happening at the time of lockdown. They had to be called back from the Gregory Center in Russia, in Moscow. Now it got resumed. So we are now planning first mission, unmanned mission, maybe towards the end of this year or beginning of the next year. And then the second unmanned, which will not be totally unmanned, is the robo mission. We have a Vayomitra, female robo. Because you see, you would appreciate that getting back a human being safe to the earth is as important as sending him into the space. So while we send him, we must make sure before we do that, that we are confident of having him back. That is important from all points of view. So these two initial missions will complete that exercise, will build up our confidence, and this will be a whole of government or whole of a nation approach, because you will have the naval safeguards into that, you will have coast guards into that, you will have the navy functionaries also collaborating in that, you will have the shipping ministry also, and all of them put together will put in this exercise. So we will have that Gaganyaan thing, which I think is something which is not going to, which is going to get inputs which were not obtained by the earlier human missions by the other countries. Even the Chandrayaan-3, for the very reason that it's landing in a virgin area, the South Pole area. Most of the earlier missions chose the relatively more convenient locations around the equator of the moon. So that itself makes it exclusive. So we have actually dared to tread into more difficult terrain, which also gives an advantage in the sense that there is a possibility of water craters being there, and therefore experimenting with oxygen, hydrogen, all those things which are closer to human life, to clean energy, etc., etc.
Sure. Sir, the Prime Minister loves science, doesn't he? And how closely did he monitor today's events? And is he going to be with ISRO on the 23rd of August?
No, I needless to say that Prime Minister is not only monitors, he takes deep interest, he has a natural aptitude for this, and I have no hesitation to say that it's but for him, it might not have been possible to have such a quantum jump. In 3-4 years, there's a huge change of scenario. And the manner today, even as far as the Artemis agreement was concerned, when Prime Minister Modi was there in Washington, D.C., as far as space is concerned, I mean, it's something like now you are not being treated as a nation which is trying to pick up cues from them. We are now being looked up for cues for others to take benefit of. So this has happened because Prime Minister has not only been personally monitoring, but he has been very forthcoming, and he has shown the courage to take out of, to sometimes break the taboos of the past, to do away with the regulations which could be inhibiting. Because you just see, if you see the pictures of Sarabhai carrying the launcher on the carriage of his bicycle way back somewhere around 1960, you would be amazed how much passion was there in store, how much aptitude, how much talent, but there were no resources. So I think Prime Minister Modi has not only monitored us, promoted us, given us an enabling atmosphere where we could give vent to all our aptitudes which are lying dormant hitherto.
A final question to you. India signed on to the Artemis Accords. That's important because A, we want space for peaceful purposes, and B, we recognize that we can't do everything ourselves. It has to be a collaboration.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think now the time has come when we have to, if we have to grow further, we have to grow in a synergy. The era of silos is over. The age of silos is over. It has to be a very collective approach, a very collaborative and a very integrated approach. And with the kind of stature that India is acquiring, our benchmarks have to be global, our approach has to be global, our parameters have to be global, and our performance also has to be global.
All right. Well, sir, thanks. Wonderful speaking to you. And
thank you, Vishnu. Thank you.
I'm certain 23rd, we're going to be having a big celebration by this time or a little afterwards on the 23rd. Thanks very much, sir, for speaking to me. Thanks very much indeed.